Welcome to Mythos AI, your source for Cliff's Notes on complex subjects. Join Anna and Phil for yet another engaging conversation.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be exploring a unique lens through which to view the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. By looking at themes of leadership, human resilience, and the chaotic nature of war, as depicted in classic literature. These enduring human experiences transcend time and offer valuable insights into the present.
Indeed, the echoes of historical conflicts reverberate through the ages, offering a deeper understanding of the challenges we face today. In particular, the Napoleonic Wars of the early 19th century, with their focus on empires clashing over territory and ideology, offer a compelling framework for examining the dynamics at play in Ukraine.
One of the most striking parallels we see is the ambition of powerful empires to enforce their will upon neighboring nations. Just as Napoleon's France sought to dominate Europe and impose its continental system in an attempt to cripple Britain's economy by blocking trade. We see a similar dynamic in Russia's actions towards Ukraine.
The continental system, for those unfamiliar, was a complex web of embargoes and blockades imposed by Napoleon in an effort to isolate Great Britain, economically and politically. It ultimately backfired, contributing to Napoleon's downfall by uniting much of Europe against him. This historical example highlights how a powerful nation's attempt to exert control over its neighbors can lead to unintended consequences and fuel resistance.
Just as Napoleon sought to redraw the map of Europe according to his vision, we see echoes of this in the current conflict with Russia, aiming to reassert its sphere of influence and counter what it perceives as Western encroachment.
Examining the nature of leadership in times of conflict is also crucial to understanding both historical and present-day events. We can contrast the approaches of Napoleon, a figure often associated with charisma, ambition, and a thirst for personal glory, with leaders who prioritize resilience, unity, and a deep understanding of the long game.
This brings us to the concept of strategic depth, the ability to leverage a nation's resources, geography, and the resilience of its people to withstand an adversary's initial onslaught and ultimately prevail.
The Russian general Kutuzov, for example, famously employed a strategy of strategic retreat during Napoleon's invasion of Russia. He understood that Russia's vastness and the harshness of its winter were powerful allies. Rather than engaging in a head-on clash with Napoleon's Grande Armée, Kutuzov chose to cede territory, preserving his forces, while drawing the enemy deeper into Russia, where they would be weakened by logistical challenges and the brutal winter conditions.
Kutuzov's leadership was marked by patience, a willingness to accept short-term losses for long-term gains, and a deep understanding of the psychological dimensions of warfare. He recognized that demoralizing the enemy through attrition and exploiting their vulnerabilities over time could be more effective than seeking decisive victories on the battlefield.
This strategic depth, this understanding of the interplay between military might and a nation's enduring spirit, resonates strongly with the situation in Ukraine today. We see echoes of Kutuzov's approach in Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's leadership during the Russian invasion.
Zelensky's decision to remain in Kyiv, his calm demeanor in the face of immense pressure, and if effective communication both domestically and internationally have been crucial in galvanizing Ukrainian resistance and rallying international support.
His leadership, like Kutuzov's, emphasizes resilience, national unity, and a strategic understanding of the need to outlast and outmaneuver a seemingly more powerful adversary.
Zelensky's rallying cry, "I need ammunition, not a ride," when offered evacuation from Kyiv, became an embodiment of this unwavering spirit, mirroring Kutuzov's steadfastness in the face of Napoleon's advance.
The strategic withdrawal of Ukrainian forces from Severodonetsk, for example, while painful in the short term, was a calculated decision aimed at preserving the fighting capacity of the Ukrainian military. This echoes Kutuzov's tactical retreats during the Napoleonic Wars, moves that ultimately contributed to Russia's victory.
Moving beyond the decisions made by leaders in wartime, it's essential to recognize the role of ordinary individuals, both soldiers and civilians, in shaping the course of a conflict. Offer the grand narratives of history, overlook the collective efforts, sacrifices, and acts of courage that ultimately determine the outcome of wars.
This brings to mind the concept of swarm tactics, a military strategy where a large number of smaller, more agile units harass and disrupt a larger, more centralized force. Historically, we've seen this approach employed effectively by groups like the Cossacks, irregular cavalry units known for their mobility, and guerrilla warfare tactics.
In the context of the Napoleonic Wars, we can see parallels to this in the actions of Russian peasant militias who disrupted French supply lines, ambushed isolated units, and made life increasingly difficult for Napoleon's forces as they ventured deeper into Russia. These acts of resistance, often uncoordinated but collectively impactful, played a crucial role in Napoleon's eventual defeat.
Similarly, in Ukraine, we've seen the crucial role played by territorial defense units, volunteer fighters, and everyday citizens who have taken up arms to defend their homes and communities. This decentralized resistance, fueled by a deep sense of patriotism and a desire to protect their homeland, has presented significant challenges to the invading forces.
These individuals, often operating outside of traditional military structures, embody the spirit of resilience and resourcefulness. That can prove decisive in asymmetric warfare. They disrupt supply lines, gather intelligence, and engage in hit-and-run tactics, making it increasingly difficult for a larger, more conventional force to maintain control.
The widespread use of social media and digital communication tools has further amplified the impact of these decentralized actions, allowing for rapid coordination, information dissemination, and the galvanization of popular support.
This digital swarm effect, where individuals can contribute to a collective effort without centralized command, represents a significant evolution in the nature of warfare, one that has profound implications for how we understand the dynamics of modern conflicts, like the one in Ukraine.
The human cost of conflict is another crucial aspect that deserves our attention.
Beyond the strategic maneuvers and political calculations, it's essential to remember that wars are ultimately fought and endured by individuals, whose lives are irrevocably altered by violence, displacement, and the psychological scars of trauma.
Throughout history, literature and first-hand accounts have provided powerful insights into the profound impact of war on the human psyche. The experience of conflict can shatter illusions, challenge deeply held beliefs, and force individuals to confront the darkest aspects of human nature.
Consider the concept of moral injury, a relatively recent term in psychology that describes the profound psychological distress experienced by individuals who have perpetrated, witnessed, or failed to prevent acts that transgress their deeply held moral beliefs and expectations. This can manifest as guilt, shame, a sense of betrayal, and a loss of faith in oneself and the world.
Moral injury differs from post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, in that it centers on a violation of one's moral code, rather than simply exposure to traumatic events. This distinction highlights the complex interplay between our experiences and our internal sense of right and wrong, particularly in the context of war, where individuals are often placed in situations that challenge their fundamental values.
The siege of Mariupol in Ukraine offers a poignant example of the human cost of conflict and the enduring resilience of the human spirit. The city, subjected to relentless bombardment and a prolonged siege, became a symbol of Ukrainian resistance and the brutality of modern warfare.
The accounts of civilians trapped in Mariupol, sheltering in basements, struggling to access basic necessities like food, water, and medical care underscore the indiscriminate nature of war and its devastating impact on innocent lives. The stories of those who endured weeks of bombardment in the Azovstal steel plant, a sprawling industrial complex that became a last bastion of Ukrainian defense, are particularly harrowing.
These individuals, facing overwhelming odds and unimaginable conditions, demonstrated extraordinary courage, resilience, and a deep commitment to protecting their comrades and their nation.
Their experiences serve as a stark reminder of the human cost of conflict, the enduring strength of the human spirit, and the importance of bearing witness to the suffering of those caught in the crossfire of war.
Ideology and the role it plays in shaping conflicts is another crucial aspect that merits our attention. Wars are rarely simply about territory or resources. They're often fueled by deeply held beliefs, narratives of historical grievance, and competing visions of the future.
Examining the ideological justifications used by those in power to mobilize populations and legitimize their actions can offer valuable insights into the underlying dynamics of conflict. We see this throughout history, from the religious wars of the past to the ideological clashes of the 20th century.
In the context of the Napoleonic Wars, Napoleon presented himself as a liberator, spreading the ideals of the French Revolution across Europe. He skillfully used propaganda and rhetoric to rally support for his cause, portraying his conquests as a crusade against tyranny and a force for modernization.
However, this narrative often masked a more pragmatic reality of imperial expansion, economic exploitation, and the consolidation of power.
Similarly, in the current conflict, we see competing narratives and justifications being used to shape public perception and influence the course of events. Russia, for instance, has invoked the protection of Russian-speaking populations in Ukraine, the need to counter NATO expansion, and the historical ties between the two nations to justify its actions.
Ukraine, on the other hand, emphasizes its right to self-determination, its desire to align with Western institutions, and its resistance to what it perceives as an act of aggression by a neighboring power.
Understanding these competing narratives and the historical, cultural, and political contexts that inform them is essential for navigating the complexities of the conflict and discerning the motivations and goals of the actors involved.
It's also crucial to recognize that ideology can be a powerful tool for dehumanizing the enemy, justifying violence, and fueling cycles of retribution and escalation.
By critically examining the role of ideology in shaping conflicts, we can better understand the dynamics of propaganda misinformation and the manipulation of historical narratives for political gain.
This critical awareness is particularly important in today's information landscape, where the proliferation of social media and online platforms has made it easier than ever to spread disinformation, manipulate public opinion, and exacerbate existing divisions.
The pursuit of peace and the complexities involved in achieving it is another vital aspect that we must address. Peace is often framed as the absence of war, but it encompasses far more than simply the cessation of hostilities.
True peace requires addressing the root causes of conflict, fostering reconciliation between communities, and rebuilding trust between nations. It involves creating conditions that allow for dialogue, understanding, and the peaceful resolution of differences.
In the aftermath of war, societies face the monumental task of healing from trauma, reintegrating displaced populations, rebuilding infrastructure, and addressing the psychological and emotional scars of conflict. This process can take generations and requires a sustained commitment from all stakeholders.
Reconciliation is not about forgetting the past, but rather about acknowledging past wrongs, seeking forgiveness, and finding ways to move forward together. It involves creating spaces for dialogue, promoting understanding, and building bridges between communities that have been torn apart by conflict.
The process of rebuilding trust is equally complex. It requires transparency, accountability, and a willingness to address grievances and injustices. It involves creating mechanisms for peaceful cooperation, promoting economic development, and fostering cultural exchange.
Ultimately, the pursuit of peace is an ongoing process, one that demands sustained effort, dialogue, and a commitment to building a more just and equitable world.
The complexities of peace extend beyond the geopolitical stage and into the lives of individuals profoundly impacted by conflict.
The process of healing from trauma, rebuilding lives and communities, and finding meaning in the aftermath of profound loss is a journey fraught with challenges.
Individuals who have experienced the horrors of war often carry invisible wounds, the psychological and emotional scars that can linger long after the fighting has ceased.
Addressing these invisible wounds is crucial for fostering individual healing and enabling societies to move forward.
Providing access to mental health services, supporting the reintegration of displaced persons, and creating spaces for individuals to share their stories and process their experiences are essential steps in this process.
It's also important to recognize the ripple effects of conflict, how the trauma experienced by individuals can reverberate through families and communities across generations.
The concept of intergenerational trauma highlights how the psychological effects of war can be transmitted from one generation to the next, often through subtle but profound ways.
Children who grow up in the shadow of conflict may inherit their parents' anxieties, fears, and unresolved grief, even if they haven't directly experienced the events themselves.
Addressing intergenerational trauma requires a holistic approach, one that recognizes the interconnectedness of individual family and community healing.
Creating opportunities for intergenerational dialogue, fostering understanding between generations, and providing support for families impacted by conflict are crucial steps in this process.
The pursuit of peace and reconciliation is not a linear path. It's a complex and often messy process marked by setbacks and breakthroughs, moments of despair and glimmers of hope.
It requires patience, empathy, and a willingness to engage in difficult conversations even when they're uncomfortable or challenging.
Building a more peaceful world demands a multifaceted approach, one that addresses the root causes of conflict, promotes dialogue and understanding, and fosters a culture of empathy and compassion.
It also requires us to confront difficult truths about our own societies and the ways in which we contribute to systems of injustice, inequality, and violence.
The lessons we learn from history, the insights we gain from examining past conflicts, and the stories of those who have endured them can guide us in this pursuit.
By acknowledging the human cost of war, embracing the complexities of peace, and committing ourselves to building a more just and equitable world, we can create a future where conflict is not inevitable, but a choice that we actively choose to avoid.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the complexities of war and peace.
We hope this exploration has provided you with new perspectives and a deeper understanding of the enduring challenges and opportunities we face as a global community.
Thanks for listening to Mythos AI. Stay tuned for more concise insights. And remember to hit the like button and subscribe for future episodes.